So good afternoon. Was lunch good?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Good retreat so far?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I was just finishing lunch, so I apologize for being late. But I'm very happy to introduce Todd Arnaud.
Hi, good to see you.
Arnaud, we'll introduce you first. Arnaud Michaelis was a neo-Nazi skinhead. The forgiveness shown by people he once hated has helped Arnaud turn his life around, bringing him to embrace diversity in practice, gratitude for all life. Arnaud is now a speaker sharing his story to help people escape hate and extremism, and works as an interventionist with Parents for Peace. And he is the author of My Life After Hate, available on Amazon. Thank you, Arnaud, for being here. Now, Miri Halperin is a clinical psychologist, advocate, and speaker, specializing in trauma and recovery. She helps communities navigate the impact of trauma with clarity, compassion, and evidence-based care. Miri is the director of trauma training and services at Parents for Peace, and a lecturer at Harvard Medical School, where she trains the next generation of trauma-informed clinicians. Miri, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks. Happy to do it.
I'm from LA, by the way. I'm not used to the humidity here. You can't see me dripping. And Todd, thank you so much for being here. Todd is one of our amazing parent advocates, and he's been a phenomenal partner for years now. And so moderating the panel is Todd Bressler, an advocate against anti-Semitism in K-12. He is the co-chair of his school district's anti-hate task force, and has been featured on the podcast Education in a Time of War, and has been quoted in the relevant articles in the Boston Globe and Boston Magazine. Todd, thank you so much for being here. Let's go ahead and get the panel started.
Arnaud is going to start us off with about 15 minutes to 20 minutes of his personal story and journey, life history, and what has brought you here today.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks, everyone, for coming out today. Thank you all for being educators. I know it's such an important job, and I know it's not easy, and at times it might feel thankless, but I'm certainly grateful to all of you for the work that you do. I grew up in a suburb of Milwaukee, Wisconsin called Mequon. Nice house, nice neighborhood. My parents were together. They loved me very much. They let me know that at every turn. On the surface, my childhood looked pretty idyllic. And honestly, now that I've grown and had the good fortune to travel literally around the world, I understand that there are probably billions of children on this planet who would feel like they won the lottery if they swapped childhoods with me. But as it was, underneath that veneer of normalcy, there was dysfunction. And that dysfunction really had a lot to do with my dad's alcoholism. Now, when I say my dad was an alcoholic, he still is an alcoholic. He's still around, thank God. A lot of people right away, they think, oh, Dad was abusive, he was mean. But my dad wasn't a mean drunk. My dad was a fun drunk. And what that means is when my dad was drunk, we were going to light off fireworks in the backyard and shoot pistols in the basement. We had a pistol range in our basement that my brother and I were taught how to fire pistols as soon as we could hold them. And that was a lot of fun for a couple little boys. It wasn't a lot of fun for my mom because my family was really living beyond our means. And because of my dad's addiction, he often was doing more drinking than working. So all the pressure of this household that we really couldn't afford in the first place fell on my mother's shoulders. And I grew up seeing my mom suffer. Rather than be a good kid and be like, hey Mom, I love you, what can I do to help? I just started to distance myself from her and from my father, who despite his disease loved me very much. And as I distanced myself from the people who loved me, my suffering grew worse. That brings up a very simple truth that I think about on a daily basis, and I actually use it as a tool. Anytime I'm in a position of conflict or strife, I remind myself that hurt people hurt people. I honestly believe that all violence, animosity, hatred in the world stems from suffering. If a human being is genuinely happy and they're genuinely feeling good about themselves and their life, there's no reason for them to hate or harm other people. It's when we're suffering and we can't engage with a positive, constructive way to process that suffering that we have a tendency to pass it on to other people. Now, I've been doing this for 15 years. It'll be 16 years in January. I do a lot of talks in middle school and high school, so I'm kind of familiar with the education space there. I like to say I'm kind of the grandparent of educators. Like I'll show up once in a while and, oh, you're so cute, let's do something fun, yay! And then all the kids are like, yay! And then I'm like, okay, they're yours now, you deal with them the rest of the year. And I love that because I learn so much from those kids. I believe I learn as much as they may learn from me. And I was talking about how hurt people one day, and a 12-year-old girl's like, Arno, not all hurt people. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's true, actually, and that's a really important point. I'm a Buddhist nowadays. Buddhism 101 is like if you are a living human being, you're going to suffer, and trying to find peace with that is a lot of what Buddhism is about. I think all humans suffer at one point in their life to one degree or another, and if all humans who were suffering went out and hurt other people, we'd be a lot worse off than we are. Fortunately, for most of us, we find a healthy way to process our suffering. It may be faith, it may be a great family, arts, music, sports, activism, career, whatever. But when you don't find a healthy way to process that trauma, it tends to get transferred to other people. And so as a kid, I started out as a bully on the school bus, and I got a kick out of it. It was a rush for me. And being genetically predisposed to addiction, as soon as I started causing trouble on the school bus and I saw these other kids were afraid of me and the teachers were afraid of me and the parents were afraid of me, I got a rush from it and I became addicted to that sensation. Like any other addiction, the amount of substance that I intake the first time doesn't get me high 10 times later. I liken it to a roller coaster quite often. If you go on a roller coaster for the first time, you're all like, oh, it's all this tension building up and you don't know when it's going to drop, and oh, then it drops and you're like, wow, wow. But if you go on the same roller coaster 10 times in a row, besides probably losing your lunch, it's going to get boring the 10th time. Right? Okay, here we go. Yep, all right, woo. So my antisocial behavior functioned in that same way. So I went from being a bully on the school bus, to fights in the schoolyard, to breaking and entering, to vandalism. When I was 14 years old, I started drinking myself. And the first time I drank, I probably had 3-4 beers and I passed out. When I quit drinking 20 years later, I could drink 18 beers in an evening and still function the next day. That's how substance abuse works. And my behavior was the exact same way. So as a young kid, it was no longer a kick to just be the lone bully, so I would get a bunch of other kids to jump in and be bullies with me. I always had to escalate. I was always looking for the next greatest rush of offending people and shocking people. That led me to punk rock when I was about 14 years old. I still love punk rock. I don't want to make it sound like punk is some kind of gateway drug to becoming a white power skinhead. But punk is a lot of different things to different people. And to me, back then, punk was just about breaking things and shocking people and repulsing people. And that's what I really loved about it. Back then, I had a mohawk hairdo. And in the late 80s, like, that was shocking. Mohawks are kind of passe now. Like, ball players got mohawks, dude on the chocolate chip cookie commercials got a mohawk. It's not shocking anymore. But in the late 80s, it was shocking. And that's what attracted me to get my hair did like that. Well, if you think a mohawk is shocking, try a swastika. Swastikas are really shocking. And that was my attraction to white nationalism, is that it was so despised by civil society, at least in the late 80s it was. And that's why I got into it. Because to me it was just a logical progression, the next like ultimate way of pissing people off. And I got into white nationalism through white power skinhead music. Keep in mind, this is 1987. It's pre-internet. There's no Spotify. There's no file sharing. Like I listened to a bootleg cassette of a white power skinhead band from the UK. And when I heard that, like the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and it was just like going from opiates to black tar heroin. Like I'm like, oh, this is the best way to piss people off that I've come across yet, and I'm all about it. I knew why it shocked people. I knew why people were repulsed by swastikas. I had a limited amount of Holocaust education my freshman year of high school. I responded really poorly to it. I was very defensive about it. I'm actually Prussian, like old school Germany. largely of Northern European descent and German and Prussian. So when my English teacher is having us read Diary of Anne Frank and Night, I was like, well, my ancestors were already all here by then. Why do I got to hear about this? This isn't my problem. And he wasn't blaming me one bit. He's just trying to educate us. But me being the broken, agitated kid that I was, I took it as a finger pointing at me. And so that actually, it backfired as far as the intention of the Holocaust education went, because it just made me more resistant to listening to anybody and more attracted to, I was like, the teacher's really pissed. This is awesome. I can piss off the teacher too. So I saw a way that I could get at him and actually have power over the teacher just by saying horrible, shocking things. So I became a white power skinhead when I was 16 years old. I had been screaming in punk bands for a couple years at that point. I do not have a lick of musical talent then or now, but I could scream really loud. I can't scream like that anymore because I get chronic migraines, and screaming would give me a migraine like clockwork. But back then I could scream really loud. I got crazy on stage. I liked doing it. It was fun. I could get the crowd going. And it just made sense to me to start my own white power skinhead band, since that was my vector of exposure to white nationalism. I'm going to carry that on, and now instead of having to get a bootleg tape of a record from the UK, we'll make this music in Milwaukee. And that band was like a magnet for every pissed off white kid in Wisconsin. Our gang went from me and the guys in the band, 4 or 5 guys, to 10 guys, to 20 guys, mainly guys, a lot of guys. There was always some like straggler girls that came around here and there, but it was mostly angry young men, as it is today. And as my friends and I were radiating hate and violence into the world gave it back to us. When I'm talking with kids, I talk a lot about inputs and outputs. In addition to being a former white nationalist, I'm also a former information technology consultant. I'm not going to talk too much about that time of my life because it's just too traumatic, but that's a joke. IT guys will get that. But I talk about input and output because not only is our phones and computers and things like that an input and output system, but the world we live in functions on inputs and outputs as well. So as my friends and I are inputting hate and violence into the world around us, the world just reflects it back to us. And within a year of starting this gang, my best friend who started the gang with me and who played guitar in my band shot a kid who came to do a drive-by in our house. Within a year and a half, another very close friend of mine who I shared a birthday with, he was exactly 1 year younger than me, was shot and killed in a street fight as he was out practicing hate and violence as I had taught him to do. And rather than look inward and rather than contemplate and be like, maybe we could change something here. Maybe we could change the way we're acting. Maybe we could make better decisions. Of course we don't do that. Of course, per the ideology that we have assumed as our identity, we blamed everyone else on earth for the misfortunes that we had brought upon ourselves. And this is a really important thing to understand about radicalization of all sorts. Whether it's white nationalism or it's Islamism or it's Antifa, the new thing of nihilistic violent extremism, they all have the same dynamic. Whereas when you adopt these ideologies as who you are, and you input all this negative energy into the world, your life starts going down the toilet. And rather than realize what you're doing and that you have some agency here and you want to put the brakes on, you continue to blame everybody else for the poor decisions you're making, and your life continues to go down the toilet. And this is how people, I believe, get to the point where nothing but homicide followed by suicide seems to make sense. I was involved in neo-Nazi hate groups for 7 years. I got out in 1994, and the most frequently asked question I get is, how did you get out? We'll do some Q&A later, and there's no questions that are off limits. I'm happy to answer any questions you got. I love tough questions. I love questions I've never had before, which is pretty rare. But that main, most frequently asked question of how did I leave, the best way to sum it up is exhaustion. Again, making the parallel, and it's not even a parallel, it's just making the point of addiction. Because now we're talking about addiction to hate. And in my case, it's co-presenting with addiction to alcohol, but hate addiction can happen on its own without any substances involved as well. If you go to a 12-step meeting, AA, NA, whatever, you'll find a room full of people who are sick and tired of being sick and tired. That's the experience of addiction. It literally sucks the life out of you every waking moment of your day. And your entire being is focused on obtaining the object of your addiction and consuming it and suffering the consequences and then repeating the cycle. So I was exhausted by my addiction to hate. I was exhausted because I knew what I was doing was wrong. I knew why swastikas repulsed people, and I didn't care as long as I got that rush of offending people. The same way that a heroin junkie may not be really excited about the idea of prostituting themselves for their drugs, but they don't care as long as they get their drugs. That was my relationship with the swastika when it began. It was exhausting to cut myself off from the rest of society, which I had to do in order to maintain that ideology. The ideology is like a card house. You have this big house of cards, and if somebody just stomps on the floor hard enough, the whole thing comes tumbling down. So on top of like trying to obtain your substance all the time, you have to be guarding this card house so nobody knocks it over. Because if it all collapses, then who are you? That identity is everything that you are. So that was exhausting. But what was most exhausting was when people I claimed to hate treated me with kindness. And I was very fortunate that throughout this 7-year span, there were people like a Jewish boss, a lesbian supervisor, Afro-American, Latino, and Asian coworkers who treated me with kindness when I least deserved it, but when I needed it most. And in doing so, they not only lit a light to guide me to a better place, but they put themselves in a position of power. There's all sorts of conversation nowadays about power dynamics, and those are fair conversations to have. But a lot of people, they might talk about power dynamics constantly, but they still don't understand what real power is. And to me, real power is when somebody outwardly says they hate you and you say, you know what, I'm not going to hate you back. I'm not going to play by your rules. You're going to play by my rules. And my rules are, this is how one human being should treat another human being. And I experienced the good grace of encountering that. That led me to a point where I was looking for an excuse to leave by 1994. That excuse came in a 2-stage process. My girlfriend and I had an 18-month-old little girl who was conceived because we felt it was our duty as white people to crank out white children. And her and I broke up, go figure, but hate and violence and alcohol are not a recipe for a healthy relationship between a man and a woman. And a couple months after that, I'm a single parent at this point because she moved to Florida where other kids lived. A second friend of mine was murdered in a street fight after a concert my band had played. So at that point, I had lost count of how many friends had been incarcerated. I realized if I didn't change my ways, death or prison was going to take me from my daughter. So I left hate groups in 1994, went on a whole long journey from there to 2010 when I went public with my story strategically on the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, which is my anniversary of this work every year. Nowadays, I work for an incredible organization called Parents for Peace. You guys all have some Parents for Peace content on your tables. Business cards for me and Miri are up on our table here if you'd like one later. At Parents for Peace, we coach families who have a loved one that's been radicalized into any flavor of violent extremism as to how to create an environment most conducive to lead that person to a better place. We also work directly with the individuals who are radicalized, and we do training for frontline personnel like police officers, educators, social workers, mental health professionals. And it's really the greatest gift I can ask for now. And Miri and I are colleagues, we work together, we have little signal chats, we have meetings every week. And I'm the one in the meeting going, I don't know what I'm going to do with this kid. He's driving me nuts. And that's what the point of the meetings is. I ask people who are smart like Miri for guidance. But it's not whether the case is successful or not. Many of them are successful too, and I should put more time and energy emotionally into that than I do the ones that are difficult. But in any case, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to hopefully intervene and take a kid from the path I was heading down to a path where he or she can be a happy, healthy member of society.
Arno, I think it's fair to say the power in your story should offer hope to just about everybody.
Thanks.
We're going to dig into some of the themes that you talked about a little bit more in our panel, and I'm sure there will be some questions from the audience. Before we do that, Miri is going to talk for about 10 to 15 minutes on adolescence and vulnerability.
If we can talk about it literally in 1 second, they're adolescents. Take it done. They're already vulnerable. Hi everybody, so my name is Dr. Miri Halperin. I'm a clinical psychologist, as Todd mentioned before. And I'm the training director at Parents for Peace, the trauma services director. And just before I talk about adolescence, just to tell you like why I got into working with Parents for Peace, because I'm the new kid in the block there. I started about a year ago.
Yeah.
So my world is trauma. I dedicated my life to understand trauma from different levels of care. I moved to the US and my dissertation was about how to help kids who were exposed to terrorism and war, and work in schools and inpatient, outpatient, residential, all of that, but always from the victim perspective. So I created different programs to help youth and young kids and parents and how to create insecure attachment and all of that. And then a little bit after October 7th, I started giving talks more about the mental health aspect of anti-Semitism and kind of did a shift and really talked about the trauma aspect of what's been happening because of October 7th. And someone from Parents for Peace heard one of my talks and said, come join us, you don't need to fight alone. I'm like, I never heard about you guys. What were you doing? Which was an issue in my opinion, that as a mental health provider in one of the leading clinics in the US actually, I've never heard about this amazing organization. So I joined, and it's a privilege because now I'm moving from intervention to prevention. And I'm wearing those two hats. On one hand, I'm treating the victims of hate crimes, but I'm also treating the perpetrators of the same hate crime and helping the parents to come back together. So all of that to say to your question, teenagers are vulnerable because of the developmental stage they're in. So think about the brain development, right? I mean, we think about teens, their brain is not fully developed at all. I would argue that for some 20-year-olds, their brain is not fully developed as well. What's happening for them, this is also a critical time in terms of social development and creating relationship with their peers. So as they're stepping to this area where parents are not that important anymore and families over here, social environment is everything. And they're very vulnerable because a lot of them did not develop critical thinking yet. And we can spend hours talking about why we don't teach enough critical thinking in schools, but they're very prone to just consume information, like Arno was saying, from the internet. So once you have a vulnerable kid that their brain is not fully developed, that cannot identify what is propaganda and what is not propaganda, and then they don't know exactly the critical thinking skill to ask the right questions, then they're already more vulnerable to extremism. On top of that, just this is part of developmental, right? Now we have also people that are vulnerable because of other reasons. For example, trauma. People who experience trauma, individuals who experience trauma, the way the brain works, shifting a little bit, meaning the part of the brain that is in charge of problem solving, executive functioning, communicating effectively to the world, the prefrontal cortex, when someone is triggered, that part of the brain shuts down, and the other part of the brain, the limbic system, takes over. That's the fight, flight, freeze response. So they're already not able to think in the same way if they have trauma, plus unresolved grievances, which basically means I have trauma, something, it can be, doesn't have to be capital T trauma, bullying, being teased, being under chronic stress, all of those kind of stuff put them in a more vulnerable position. And when you have unresolved grievances, basically, I don't know where to put all this sadness or all this despair. I need a scapegoat. I need someone to blame. Now take that, the lack of critical thinking, and the internet, and it's the perfect storm. Because now those teens are more vulnerable to people that are living on those social media platforms and take them and radicalize them. You don't know who to blame? Let me tell you who to blame. Usually it's the Jews, but sometimes it's also other groups. But they're giving them meaning, and then not only are they giving them that meaning, they're giving them a sense of belonging. So a lot of people in society, a lot of teens specifically, they need that sense of belonging. They need that social connection. Like Arno was saying in his story, he was trying to find a group. He was trying to find a sense of belonging when he didn't feel it also at home. So now you have a group of people that giving you the reason why you're suffering, they're giving you a new community, and also giving you meaning, because you're part of a bigger group that's fighting an ideology. So all of those things put them more at risk, unfortunately, which is why we really need to help specifically young people and teens, and starting in K to 12. When they're in college, it's too late, in my opinion. The work starts at K to 12. And I'll end in a second. The other thing I would say is that for teenagers, the age goes down for what is considered a teenager. And that's across. So for example, my previous work was in the, about self-harm and suicidality. And we used to think that the average age of someone to self-harm was 16 to 17. It went down to 13 and 12 and sometimes 10 years old, which tells us that the way that we even think about what is considered an adolescence also went down. So our interventions need to change, and the prevention method need to change as well. We can't just wait for them to come to us. We really do need to go to them in order to get them out of that cycle before they even sometimes get into the cycle.
Are we going to clap after every time?
When you say smart things, they'll clap every time. Thank you. So something that you mentioned, Miri, and something that we heard from Brianna Wu in one of the earlier keynotes is the role that digital tech and social media plays in all of this. Arno, I'm interested in hearing from you. Social media is a place where students, they find friends, they find places of belonging, they form bonds, they do a lot of passive learning. It's also a place where lies and incitement can spread very quickly, and it drives polarization, even over very small differences. Can you talk to us a little bit about the role that social media algorithms and echo chambers fit into some of the vulnerability factors?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I have to let everybody know, I do not have any letters after my name, but I hang out with a lot of people who do have letters after their name, and sometimes even before their name. And so I get some like mental health chops through osmosis through them. But my theory is it's deeper than just social media. It's the screens themselves. Because we now have a generation of children, if not going on 2 generations, where many kids, I'd say the majority of kids, from their earliest formative moments are handed a screen to keep them busy. And that means when they're 1-2 years old, they're being taught that every input they give has a corresponding immediate output. There's instant gratification in all of their interaction on those screens. And then they come to expect that from life. As they get into their teens and they realize that's not how life works, now they're like, oh, well, this is all unfair. This is boring. Oh, you mean I have to work? You mean I have to practice? In my day in the late 80s, and I'm sure throughout human history, there's always been the disaffected group of teenagers, and that's where I kind of cultivated when I was recruiting. Now I think we have a larger amount of disaffected kids than we've ever had in human history before, and they're all pissed off. They all think there's that because life isn't just falling into their lap, it's a huge injustice. And then you take this next step in the social media algorithms manipulating them. And yeah, it's exponentially more dangerous and more of a threat than it was back in the late 1980s.
Can I add on that?
Yes, and.
Love
Just a
and.
follow-up question for
Yes,
you. Anyhow,
please.
something that Arno hit on is the idea of recruitment. And I think it would be helpful to hear a little bit more about how the online hate recruitment works.
Okay, so the yes and. Love yes and. It's validating. I'm laughing because my area of research is traumatic invalidation, so using and is helpful and not and but. To Arno's point, the other thing that's happening online with the echo chamber is confirmation bias, right? So if I'm watching my algorithm, it's gonna be very specific to what I'm looking at, and I'm getting that sense like, oh, everybody's thinking the same way. That's not just me. And I think the perfect example, I saw this post actually earlier today when someone said that the assassination of Charlie Kirk, they had completely different feed than their friends in about how this person was talking. So we're getting different information, and then we're thinking that we're in the right, that everybody's thinking the same way. And we're also getting numb, right? Because when you're looking at a screen, it's like a movie, it's not real. So when you have horrible images on your screen, you're becoming more numb to it because it doesn't feel like an actual human being on the other side. So we're normalizing hate. Those echo chambers play a huge role in what we're seeing and the way the algorithm is working. And then again, back to the developmental brain, they're not supposed to be seeing stuff like that online. There's not enough agency on the platform to actually stop some of those stuff. There's 84%, if I'm not mistaken, by the Pew Institute. They did this research, and only 84% of reported images, content, hateful content is actually being acted upon.
It's actually being what?
Acted upon. So they're actually removing content. So a lot of the content is not being removed. I can give you an example. In 2024, last year, there was in TikTok, there was a hashtag that had it was an anti-Semitic hashtag. It has more number of likes than the number of Jews in the world. So it's still there. So there is something about social media that amplifying everything, but then the confirmation bias makes us think, oh, it's fine, everybody's the same. So the end issue, the recruiting, back to the grieveness, right? So if I'm going down the rabbit hole, let's say even in COVID was a great example, because during COVID, a lot of teens were spending their time at home on the computer all the time, right? So they got into all of those rooms and they're learning new things, not knowing if it's real or not real, thinking that it's the absolute truth. And by the way, not only teens, I saved with my son. I have a 9-year-old and he comes and show me, look at this cool thing on YouTube. And I'm like, no, it's AI, that's not real. No, it's real because he said it's real. 9. We need to teach them that young what is real and what's not real, because with AI, everything seems real. And if you have someone who knows how to talk, they can convince you about everything. So they're using that as a recruiting mechanism, using the loneliness, using the grievances. Other people that are more vulnerable, by the way, are kids that are on the spectrum. So kids on the autism spectrum and in general mental health issue will make people more vulnerable to extremism. That does not make them radicalized per se, but it is making them more vulnerable to other groups finding them, not knowing that maybe this is a harmful content, or maybe this is whoever behind the screen I should not be talking with, and that's how they're recruiting them, right? So if I'm a kid, let's say I'm a kid on the spectrum, or let's say I'm a kid, we just had this discussion. So one example would be a kid, for example, that is part of the LGBTQ community, and they're being bullied at school, and they're trying to find a place of belonging, right? And come a group, whatever ideology you're thinking about, right? Whatever group it is, and they're offering them, here's a place where you're gonna feel safe, you're gonna feel respected, and we're gonna give you meaning. And now you're hooked. Now what's happening after you're getting hooked? Now you're also gonna get more material through that algorithm to show you why you need to stay in the same place, to give you more reasons why this is my group. They have my back when other people don't have my back. And then later there's going to be a call for action. We have your back, but now you need to prove to us. Now you need to be part of this group. What is the next thing you're going to do? Now the other thing that's happening is that you want to be part of the in-group. And part of being part of the in-group is showing it, right? So for example, you're going to see, I'm going to take the example of the protests that we're seeing. After October 7th, there were a ton of protests against Israel and pro-Palestinian protests. And a lot of my clients were telling me that they actually had to, in order to be part of a group, their social group, they had to say out loud that they're against Israel, for example. They had to take part of their identity and push it out. Now that's not just for Judaism, by the way. Every single group, in order to be part of an ideology to that extreme, you actually have to reject other parts of your identity, similar to what Arno was saying. In order to keep that car, the tower going, you need to let other type of information out of your surface. You cannot look at that.
So how can, for our audience today, schools and educators create a space of healthy belonging for students in the building so that their students aren't looking for belonging in unhealthy spaces? For anybody who wants to take
You
it.
want to start?
A big milestone in my life was, it sucks now that I think about it, two of the biggest milestones in my life were atrocities that happened. And the first one was the Sikh temple shooting on August 5th, 2012, which happened about 20 minutes from where I live. And a white nationalist who was from the gang that I helped to start went into the Sikh temple of Wisconsin and he murdered 7 people before taking his own life after a firefight with the police. And at the time, that was like the most deadly attack by an affiliated white nationalist since the 60s, when the Ku Klux Klan killed 4 little girls with a bomb that was meant for Dr. King. After this attack, I met a man named Pardeep Singh Kalika. His father, Satwant, was the last person killed in that attack. And Satwant died about as far away from a door as I am from that window that he could have run out of at any time. Instead, he fought the gunman with a butter knife and was shot 5 times before he fell. But his bravery bought time for the Oak Creek Police Department to get there. They got in a firefight with the shooter. The first cop got really shot up, but he survived. I mention this because after meeting Pardeep, he and other people who had lost loved ones that day had started a group called Serve to Unite. In Sikhi, seva or service is one of the pillars of the faith, as it is in many human faiths. And they wanted to go out in the community and like show people what Sikhs are all about. Like, we're not just cab drivers and gas station owners and doctors and engineers. Like, we help people, we feed hungry people, we build houses. But they still didn't really know how or where this is going to be done. So when Pardeep and I met, we took this program to schools, and we worked K through college, actually, but primarily K-12. It developed in a program of arts-driven service learning and global engagement. So we asked these kids what issues in society they were concerned about, and then we facilitated solution-driven service learning programs that were arts infused and had guidance from people all over the world for these kids to do something about this issue. So, for instance, we address every issue you can think about, but the one that comes to mind as a great example is human trafficking. We partnered with a nonprofit in Milwaukee that raised awareness of human trafficking and advocated for its survivors. And then we had some of those survivors come speak in person. Some of them wrote poems or wrote essays, and the kids from these talks and essays and programs created art installations based on those survivors' stories. The art installations then went to City Hall and then on a traveling exhibit around the city. So our kids are now doing something about human trafficking. A lot of them didn't know what it was before they heard from these survivors, but now everybody in the city knows what it is. So now these kids are getting a healthy sense of identity, purpose, and belonging. Who am I? I'm a human being, just like all the other human beings. My purpose is to help my fellow human beings when they need help and ask how I can be of service. Doing all that creates a natural sense of belonging. So when we had our program going for like 4 or 5 years and ran into funding and logistics issues, it's kind of on hiatus now. But during that time, when these kids get a healthy sense of identity, purpose, and belonging, they're effectively inoculated against falling into the pitfalls of violent extremism. So I think socio-emotional learning, service learning, the arts, all those things really need to be front and center. And I know it's very difficult right now with all these culture wars going on. The culture wars are, I don't have to tell you guys, I mean, it's off the rails. But my solution to that, and just to kind of wrap up the whole thought, is instead of teaching children what to think, we need to teach children how to think and how to feel and how to manage their feelings. And I think if we can pay a lot of attention to that and make that as important as test scores and as important as the 3 R's, I think and none of these in school anymore or elsewhere if we can possibly help it before they're 16, then I think we could be in pretty good shape.
I love that. Can you come to my son's school? So creating schools that are trauma-informed. What does it mean to be trauma-informed? There's 4 R's. Realize that there is trauma, respond in a way that is trauma-informed, meaning not re-traumatizing. And then that means the physical space and the emotional space, by the way. What it means when you take it down from the trauma-informed, it means seeing the person in front of you. Seeing people as people and not as problems. Understanding the students. And you're in the front line. You are with our kids every day, probably more than I am, by the way. So you can see signs of kids that are more isolated, or all of a sudden showing aggressive behavior, or being shunned to the side, or being bullied. And if you could reach out to them, don't wait for them to come to you, half of the battle. Reach out to them, because then you're becoming a trusted adult in their life. You're becoming a connection for those kids. So that is part of being trauma-informed, helping them being seen. We talked about critical thinking, so I don't need to say it again. Well, I will say it again. Please teach critical thinking. That's huge. Asking questions and making sure that they're knowing how to be curious about stuff. The other thing about a sense of belonging that Anna was talking about and I mentioned before, help them find a sense of belonging. Gardening, volunteering, and whatever they find based on their values. Because when you think about someone who's suffering, a lot of times their primary emotion, so emotions are signals, right? I'm going to get nerdy for a second and talk about emotions. So emotions are signals. Every emotion tells us something about a situation, and it comes with an urge. Sadness tells us there is a loss, real or abstract loss, and the urge is to replace it. So if I lost my community, I'm going to try to replace it. Anger tells us someone is crossing my values, and the urge is to defend. People think it's attack, it's defending. Guilt tells us I did something wrong, and the urge is to repair. Love tells us I love this person, I want to spend time with them. Joy tells us this activity is good for me, I want to do more of that. So every emotion tells us something. A lot of time what happens, especially when there is trauma or in some adversity, it's really hard to sit with the sadness because it's being conditioned with feeling helpless, with feeling out of control. So we go to secondary emotion, and the big secondary one that we see are anxiety, anger, and shame. Shame is if it's all my fault, I'm a bad person, so maybe I could have prevented it. So what you might see as educators on the outside, let's say you're seeing a kid that is misbehaving at school, and now he's so angry. He might be sad. You want to tap into what is the primary emotion, and then the best antidote for trauma and for regulation is agency. Is giving them something to do. And to Arno's point and story, leadership and volunteering are huge, because once you're doing something for someone else, you're feeling that place of power you talked about before, but out of kindness. So you're giving them a new meaning and a new sense of belonging with that. There is one of my favorite quotes is by Dr. Edith Eger, who is a Holocaust survivor and a trauma psychologist, and she said, "You can't choose to vanish the dark, but you can choose to kindle the light." If you're shifting the focus from the negative to the positive, then you're reinforcing positive behavior. You're shaping a behavior by doing that. I'm a behaviorist, that's my CBT, DBT, all of those different acronyms. And when I create behavioral plans for kids, I never go to what you should reduce. I go to what you should increase. Increasing belonging, increasing connection, increasing positive behavior, increasing meaning. All of those stuff are going to serve as a protective factor if and when someone will try to recruit them. So trauma-informed, critical thinking, sense of belonging, giving meaning, giving agency. All of those stuff will make your schools a safer place. Oh, and education. Educate about the signs of radicalization. And you can find a lot of information on our website as well of helping them understand, like, okay, this is not good for me, or this is the outcome. You know, one of the things I loved about the initiative that you mentioned is that you also expose them to what does human trafficking mean, providing education, right? A lot of them don't know. And if they don't know, then they can't actually do anything about it. And also parents. This should be a community aspect, right? It starts at school. I really do think that you're the front line. It's because even nurses, we did a lecture to nurses in Massachusetts, nurses from schools, and we said, you know, when a kid comes to you again and again, and they're complaining that they have a stomachache and they don't want to be in the classroom, ask the questions why. Maybe it's not maybe it's not just their stomach. Maybe something else is going on and they're too afraid or too ashamed to say something. So be curious and ask them those questions. And also in terms of the community, you want to have a community aspect. You want to bring the parents into the picture as well. They should be part of the solution. And this needs to start with leadership, right? If you as teachers and educators are able to have difficult conversation in a way that is respectful, as a dialogue with curiosity, then you're actually modeling to the students the same way. So it's all starting from leadership and then trickling down.
So I might embarrass you a little bit, Miri,
Go for it.
a couple of plugs. We plugged Arno's book, My Life After Hate, available on Amazon. We plugged Parents for Peace. You have literature on your table. I'm going to plug some of your research on traumatic invalidation
Okay.
and creating trauma-informed schools. Miri Miri presented on Beacon Hill at the State House to the State Special Commission to Combat Anti-Semitism. Some of her research, you can catch the presentation on one of their past hearings last November or last January. We'll figure it out. Maybe somebody will send it out to the attendees here, a link to it. It's really incredible work.
Thank you.
Arno, pulling that thread a little bit, thinking back to your 14, 15, 16-year-old self, is there anything that one of your teachers could have done or could have said that maybe would have changed course for you?
Yeah, the first thing to understand is there's no silver bullet, and each child's different. And really the crux of a lot of what we're talking about now, and I think this is all the more important in this age of identity where everyone's, this is your identity, this is your identity. Remind ourselves that we are all, each one of us, all 8-something billion of us on this planet, each one of us is a unique individual. In my case, I honestly think martial arts would have been a perfect diversion for me. I was obsessed with Bruce Lee and black belt theater as a kid. I wanted to be Chinese. I wanted to do Kung Fu. My parents not having money couldn't put me in Kung Fu and karate, so I was always angry because my peers were all loaded and they did all that stuff. And there was one summer where in between, I think it was 3rd and 4th grade, through the rec department, there was a judo program for 6 weeks for like $75. And my parents scraped that together, they put me in there, and I'll never forget this. My sensei was a Latina Olympic judokan who was fairly small in stature. And there was like adults in this class as well. And this woman would take dudes like my size now and just be like, kapow! And just whip them around like nothing. And I was just in awe of her. And there wasn't an adult on earth that I would sit and listen to, but when I was in her presence, I was just sitting there waiting for her next command. And I loved judo, and I was really good at it. And she talked a lot about the spirituality of martial arts, which is a really important component of this. If the martial artist is just about to beat the snot out of people, that's not going to help. But true martial arts honestly stems from Buddhism and from spiritual practices. And if that's genuine in the martial art that you're studying, it can be an awesome diversion. In my case, when the 6 weeks was up, and it was like now $75 every 2 weeks. My parents couldn't afford it. I couldn't keep going in judo. And now I was really angry I couldn't stay in judo, and I'm more dangerous than I was before because I know enough of the basics of judo to throw people around that it completely backfired. But I honestly believe had I stayed in judo, that could have diverted me from where I ended up. And what that boils down to is a lot of what Miri was just talking about, is that authentic presence with a child, whether it's in a martial arts setting or a classroom or whatever. If you are 100% present for any human being that you're present with, they're going to feel that. In Buddhism, it's called authentic presence. And when you give that to your students, that can be the seed that's planted that comes to fruition that when they need it later in their life.
So we didn't plan this ahead of time, but it sounds like another plug for Krav Maga from earlier today.
Yeah.
Speaking of earlier today, one of the things that Loai Al-Sharif shared in his childhood and early education is that he was taught not only to hate Israel, but to hate Jews at large. Is anti-Semitism a common thread in general extremist recruitment, thought, behavior?
Yeah, can I take that one, Mary?
Go for it.
Okay, and this goes way, way back. I think most people who are, I have to frame this some. I'm passionate about combating anti-Semitism because I was led out of the most miserable period of my life largely by the light that Jewish people shone upon the world. And without that light, I don't know that I would have survived it. So I have a personal debt I feel the need to repay. That's number one why anti-Semitism, combating anti-Semitism is very important to me. Number two, it's the right thing to do. Number three, from someone who's been working in counter-violent extremism for 15 years internationally and working with every violent extremist flavor you could imagine. And by the way, in that space, I'm what's known as a former. Our colleague at Parents for Peace, Mubin Sheikh, is a former terrorist in Muslim clothing, as he puts it. He handles all of our Islamist cases. I handle the white nationalist ones. Mubin and I were doing a talk about the similarities between Islamism and white nationalism. And someone asked me, they said, Arno, what's the whole, like in a nutshell, what's the white nationalist take on Jews? And I said, well, white nationalists believe that there's a 1,000-year-old plot by the Jews to destroy all the white people on the planet Earth. And if we don't fight for all we're worth, we're going to be genocided out of existence by these evil Jews. And then someone said, okay, Mubin, same question. And he's like, well, the same thing he just said. You just swap white race with Ummah. It's the exact same narrative. So going back, Adolf Hitler met with the self-proclaimed Grand Mufti of Palestine, making plans to come swooping down into the Levant and rid that area of Jews after he finished up in Europe. So this is like the beginning of this, and by the way, like Hitler didn't think the Grand Mufti of Palestine was an Aryan, and Hitler probably planned on taking them out as well. But my enemy of my enemy is a friend, and that's been going on for a very long time. In the 60s, there was the leader of the American Nazi Party was a man named George Lincoln Rockwell, who was fairly charismatic. He had a really biting satirical wit that he wielded very deftly. And him and Elijah Muhammad, the founder of the Nation of Islam, were like this. That they weren't going to, marry, their kids weren't going to get married, but they both vibed out on their hatred of Jews. And Elijah Muhammad invited George Lincoln Rockwell to speak to this, like thousands of members of the Nation of Islam. And George Lincoln Rockwell invited Elijah Muhammad to speak to his 20 guys. And but that's been going on for a long time. Up to this day, I was talking earlier, there's all this rhetoric saying, Zionists are Nazis. Zionists are Nazis. And they're just proclaiming this so factually. And I'm like, do you ever listen to what Nazis say? Because I've yet to see any Nazi say that Israel is the ancestral homeland of the Jewish people and they have a right to have a sovereign state there. I've never heard a white nationalist say that. I don't think you ever will. But you know what the white nationalists are saying? The white nationalists are saying that Jews are genocidal, occupying. They don't say white supremacists. They leave that out. But they're genocidal, colonizers, oppressors. They use the exact same language word for word that the far left uses to denigrate and delegitimize Israel. So you tell me if the Nazis are saying the exact same thing as whatever you want to call the far left, and the Zionists are just saying, look, we just want to grow olive trees and live in peace. Tell me who the Nazi is.
So from data perspective, because you give the history, I'll give the data. We'll
there you go.
each other.
Perfect.
So as Arno mentioned, we have a helpline where people can call and say, I'm worried about my loved one being radicalized, what should I do? And we go through an intake and assessment and all of that. We have this Venn diagram that we show sometimes, that it doesn't matter your ideology, far left, far right, Antifa, eco-terrorism, all of them. the content that they all bring, like the about 87% of our call, maybe more,
Yeah.
the content has anti-Semitic content in it. And when you look also at cases of shooting and terrorist attack that happen in the US, the manifesto, some of it will have anti-Semitic stuff in it. The Boston Marathon shooter had that, the school shooting. So we really look at anti-Semitism as the connective tissue across all extreme ideologies. Far left, far right, all of that, and we have the data to show it as well, which is why, for me personally, also as a Jewish person, I'm so passionate about the work that we do, because it is the gateway to radicalization. When you're tolerating hate for one group of people, you're tolerating hate for every group of people. You're becoming numb to hate. And it's easier and kind of cool right now to hate the Jews, so it's quite the gateway right now. But it is the way in to more extreme ideologies as well.
Let me add to that also, because this is something I've been talking about a lot, which doesn't end up on a lot of people's radar. Obviously, first and foremost, anti-Semitism is harmful to Jews. But as Miri says, like, anti-Semitism isn't a Jewish problem. It's a non-Jew problem. And that's true in many ways. Anti-Semitism typically, in one way or another, one form or another, eventually harms the anti-Semite. We have so many cases. I would venture to say just about every case on our docket right now that we're working with is a family that has been destroyed by a child falling under the influence of anti-Semitic, violent extremist ideologies, no matter what flavor it is. So these are people who aren't Jewish, but their family, often these are like children, teenagers tried as adults and sent to prison for 20 years because they bought into whatever anti-Semitic, violent extremist ideology they came across.
So, what I'm hearing is anti-Semitism is a bit like a gateway drug for general hate and extremism.
100%.
Absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely.
And Arno shared history, Miri shared data. I didn't plan on this, but I'll share a personal anecdote that recently came up in my own life about what you were talking about, Arno, in terms of Jews of European descent. Are we white? Are we not white? Where do we belong? Within the last month, I personally have been told that I am insane for thinking that Israel is my ancestral homeland because, quote, somebody said, "You're a white European just like me." And I said, my grandfather's the only member of his family to have escaped the Holocaust. He got over from Poland before it got really bad over there. And I told the guy, you know, between Poland and Israel, I know the country where I'd be most accepted today. And the same week, just in a bit of timing, the same week I had another friend send me an article. He lives in Little Rock, Arkansas, and he sent me an article from his local paper of a white nationalist group in that area who's creating a carve-out community, and he had circled, you know, that this carve-out community is going to be for whites. They're going to exclude African Americans, LGBTQIA+, and Jews. And I said, well, if I'm white and I'm not white, what am I? I think we've got one more question for both of you, and then a few minutes for audience Q&A. But I want to ask, are there a couple of themes that we talked about? Are there any practical tools, techniques, ways to respond that you would recommend to educators, either for if they see a student in their classroom with some of these risk factors, or to help students generally deal with the bias that they're going to encounter online?
Give some personal examples. I can talk again there. See, we're completing each other very well, Arno.
Absolutely.
Don't shame, right? Going back to the emotion piece, if you shame someone, they're going to go farther away to find someone that would accept them. So we don't shame, we bring them in instead, right? You want to have an honest conversation. You want to be curious, lean in with curiosity, that's key. Sit with them, especially with teenagers because they know everything. Ask them what they know. Maybe watch something with them and try to explain through that. Join them in their space where they are instead of pushing them farther out. That will be my biggest pivot. Don't shame them. Get them in.
I'd add to that, and this works with Uncle Joe at Thanksgiving as well, is anytime you're engaging in conversation with someone who's radicalized or on the way, first of all, they're going to have a very binary outlook of the world. So we want to try to create some space for other things other than binary. I was doing an NYPD conference and a guy from DHS asked me, he's like, how do you know if somebody's on the path to recovery from radicalization? And I just said, oh, I don't know. I just let it hang there for a minute and everybody's kind of looking at me like, what the hell kind of answer is that? And I'm like, no, I don't know is the answer. If I have someone I'm working with and I can get them to say they don't know about something rather than having an instant binary response, that's a positive step. So trying to create curiosity, create space to say I don't know. And a good way to do that is to model it. If you're talking to someone who is a TikTok expert on Gaza and Palestine, you say, oh, I don't know. I didn't hear the information that you've heard. What can you tell me about that? But as you're having that discussion, what I found to be very successful is you want to try to make that discussion about that individual. So I use the southern border as an example, even though it's kind of faded from front and center nowadays, but it was for a long time. People would be like, the southern border of the United States, people are drug dealers, everybody's coming in, blah, blah, blah. And I would say, oh, yeah, I've heard about that too. Have you been to the southern border of the United States? Well, no, but, okay, so how do you know everything you know about it? Well, I saw on the internet backwater site ABC that this, and that says, and I'd say, well, wouldn't you rather inform these opinions that are very powerful and very important to you? Wouldn't you rather have them informed by your first person lived experience rather than by second, third, fourth hand accounts, trying to people getting you to think the way they want you to think? And if sometimes they'll be like, well, yeah, actually I lived in El Paso for 10 years. Okay, tell me about that. How did that feel for you? What was your experience like for that? Try to get them talking about their feelings and their firsthand experiences one way or another, because once you do that, now you're connecting with their lived experience rather than debating the validity of the backwaters of the internet, which is always a losing battle.
Thank you. Dylan, do we have time for one or two audience questions? You've got Love. The dog's name is Love, by the way, so when I say Dylan's got Love, it's in more than one way.
You're Phil Donahue.
We're going to go to Wendy just because you already in one of the earlier sessions.
This is a question for Arno. How would you respond to a student that in class, this is a middle school age child, gives a Heil Hitler salute?
First of all, I'd ask them what that is. And you know, if he says, "Oh, well, it's Heil Hitler," I think Adolf Hitler is great. Again, you could ask them go through that same experience. If you say, "Well, obviously, you're 12. Like, have you ever been to Germany? Well, what do you know about World War II, and how did you learn it?" And get him talking about that, and always try guiding it to their experience. Like, why Adolf Hitler was great. He should have killed all the Jews. He saved Germany. Why does that resonate with you, Peter? Tell me about what part of Peter thinks that that's really cool. Like, why is that your jam, that you want to go around doing that? And so try to get them talking about their lived experience with this. And it's probably, well, I shared a thing on TikTok and I got 350,000 likes. Okay, so this is about your likes on TikTok. It's really not about Adolf Hitler. But that's the angle I would take on it. It's sadly very unproductive to be like, this is why Hitler's bad. He killed 6 million people. No, he didn't. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, now I have to get out the Denying the Holocaust book and like debunk your debunking, and we'll go back and forth like that. If you have time for that, sure. But it's more effective to get him talking about Peter and who he is. And actually that connection can lead you to a place later on where you can be like, well, actually, here's how and why 6 million people really did die. But you don't want to open with that. You want to build a connection first.
I'm gonna go up front because I'm getting tired. And then we'll get to-
Hello.
Hi.
I'm wondering if the common thread of radicalization is anti-Semitism, what trends you're seeing with radicalized Jews, and if there are different tactics that you would suggest for dealing with that specific form of radicalization.
Jews are people, so I will treat them exactly the same way I would treat non-Jews when I'm talking about radicalization. There's radicalization and extremism in every side of the spectrum, right? I would do exactly what Arno was doing. I would try to understand where it's coming from, why are they saying what they're saying, what function does the behavior have, what is the emotion that's guiding the behavior, and only then, with curiosity and respect, I can have a conversation. To me, it really doesn't matter if it's Jewish or non-Jewish. I will try to find a sense of belonging for them, meaning, agency, and only after doing all of that, we can go into theory of mind and how does it affect other people as well, because at that moment, they don't care necessarily that maybe they're hurting Hannah who's sitting over there. It looks like you have a plan B.
Like a self-hatred. Like Jews who are expressing radicalization towards other Jews or towards themselves rather.
The same thing, right? I mean, it doesn't matter which group you're targeting. You will still treat it from intervention perspective the same way. You would still lean in with the curiosity and try to understand where it's coming from. What is the function that this behavior is trying to fulfill for them?
I could add a little to that. I'd also say that it still like shocks me in our caseload. We have Afro-American white nationalists. We have white ISIS members. We have Jewish neo-Nazis. We have like people of every single demographic where you're just, this doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah.
And some people want to get really political about this and be like, well, it's internalized oppression. And I'm not saying there's nothing to that, but to me, I think it's again, they're looking for identity, purpose, and belonging. And it's way more of a psychosocial, socio-emotional issue with that child in particular than a political one that we want to take and run with. So just be aware that dynamic happens, and once, I always think I'm not going to be surprised by anything, and then for Friday when we get intakes, I'm like, oh my God, okay, this is a new one.
That's a new one.
So.
We're going to do one and maybe two. It depends if someone takes the mic from me.
Okay, I'll be quick. Thank you for being here. I think after October 7th, a lot of us, and I assume there are a lot of us in this room as Jewish educators or as pro-Jewish educators have found themselves deeply traumatized and isolated and continuously traumatized both by what happened, by our positions in a lot of our buildings that were openly hostile to our positions, to students and administrators, which make us feel alone, isolated, unable to speak out. And I hear everything you're saying about how we need to support our students. And obviously, as educators, we do. But then there's this question like, what do we do for ourselves? And I think this event is a great start. But what quick advice could there be?
So that's my other hat. Different event. So for example, I've been going around the US and Canada giving talks about how to care for ourselves going through the trauma. For educators, for psychologists, how do we balance this world? This is what Tadwa mentioned about traumatic invalidation. So it's the idea when you're sharing your pain or your trauma and the reaction of society or the people around you is, it's not that big of a deal. Or, you kind of wanted it, or it's your fault. There's 9 criteria for traumatic invalidation. And our research shows that the Jewish community right now made all 9 criteria for that. And when it happens on a systematic level, it actually creates existential crisis because we need our groups, right? So to your question, how we do it, we balance it with self-care, with agency, Like we talked, agency is the best antidote for trauma. The reason I'm doing what I'm doing, and I started doing it on October 7th, is because it's part of my own healing. You know, for the Jews in the room, the word Natan, Nun Taf Nun, you spell it forward and backward the same way because when you give, you get. And I really do believe in that. There is something about events like that that bring community together. So the reason I'm saying all that, because there's similarities in those two worlds. There's two pathways when someone is facing something that is more traumatizing. One of them can really lead to the path of hate. The other one can lead to the path of hope. And it's up to us as society and up to you as educators to help guide the people to that path of hope while also caring for yourself. Because it's a lot to carry.
I'd add to that too, just know that you're not alone. I am one of many, many millions upon millions of non-Jewish allies who are standing with you and will continue to stand with you and advocate for you. So just don't ever feel like you're all by yourself, because you're not.
Arno is an upstander.
He's an upstander. I mean, I'm the only Jewish person in our organization, but those are the people who would speak up for me when I'm not in the room. Find your people, find your upstanders.
Arno, Miri, thank you so much, and thank all of you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
So that brings our official program to a close. We have some few closing remarks. First and foremost, I want to thank all of you for taking the time on a Sunday, your entire Sunday, to come here and listen to this presentation. We really hope the program was informational and productive and useful, and gave you some tools to take back to the classroom or to the district, to the school committee that you're serving on. We ask that you, if you had a good time, share to your colleagues how great a time you had. And the next time we have a retreat, I hope you all come and bring friends with you. We'll be announcing the next event soon. I will say this also too, I didn't say this, but we're going to form a advisory council for this kind of thing. So if any of you want to join an advisory council to help us build the next events, please email me or go to the portal and email us. We'll bring you on board. One of you I talked to already? You're joining. You're already in. Excellent. Thank you. Also, if you want to give some feedback or some interviews about your experience today, we have the videographer who will take interviews in the back. That also helps us bring more people to the next events. That would be a big help for us. Where else? She's my boss. Yeah. Yes. So I also very much want to thank.
Tell them about this.
Yeah. If you have on your table this QR code, take that with you. I think it's in the teacher's kit too. So there are teacher kits in the back. You'll see them when you leave. And each of these postcards right here, scan this QR code. It'll take you to the educator portal and it'll approve you. Some of you were already approved your accounts for today. And it's free, obviously, and it has all of the resources and everything on it. When you're creating, I will say this too, when you're creating the account, there's a dollar thing, it's free. Don't worry about any of it, there's no cost. Now finally, I want to thank our sponsors. So thank you to Camera for helping to sponsor this event. Thank you to the ADL as well, and also Club Z, who were great organizational sponsors. I also want to thank our donors, the Gerzov family. Thank you so much for helping us. And for giving a phenomenal presentation with our speaker here. The Guillaume family, thank you for so much for supporting us. The Zimmerman family, the Hoffman family, and of course the Meyer family, Robert Left, and the Friedlander family. Without all of you, none of this would be possible. And we hope to have many more events in the future. Yes, and so again, thank you to the teachers who came, thank you to the school committee members who came, and thank you to the principals and the other admin who came as well. And now we have somebody else. I just want to say one more thing. I want to say thank you to the ICAN Massachusetts chairwoman, Miri Freelander. Without her, none of this would be possible. This was her dream, and it was a privilege for me to work with you to make this happen. I look forward to doing many, many more. And you are a phenomenal partner. So thank you so much for your leadership and for your dedication and your dream to make this happen. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank all of you. Thank you guys.
If you want to give us feedback and say a recommendation for the next event, please go outside with me and we'll do it very quick. And then before you leave, just take your kids and we have also dessert.